Bonsoir tout le monde. On accueille Julia Fullerton-Batten qui expose à la Basilique et qui a été en résidence pour le festival au mois de février. Sur une semaine, vous avez pris des photos sur 5 sites. On va y revenir après. Vous êtes allemande et vous vivez à Londres. Vous êtes reconnue dans le milieu de la photographie. Vous avez eu plein de prix. Je vais en citer juste quelques-uns. Le prix HSBC 2007 pour Teenage Stories, Hasselblad Blaser Master Awards et le World Photography Organization Award. On vous connaît pour un univers assez particulier qui est très narratif, mais j'imagine que il ne s'est pas imposé à vous directement comme ça. Comment il s'est construit au fil des années? Comment vous en êtes arrivé à avoir cette patte-là, ce travail qui est reconnaissable?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to come and talk today and for hosting the exhibition yesterday. It's such a beautiful location and I'm very, very honored to be here in Metz. I moved to London to become a photographic assistant after studying photography. So the work that I started when I was much younger was shooting mostly advertising campaigns. And that's how I started. I was assisting photographers who were shooting advertising. And then I started shooting advertising campaigns. I was very inspired by photography from my father, who used to take many pictures of us as a family. I'm half German, half English, but we lived in America. And my father used to go to New York City and photograph all the very pretty women in the 70s running down the street in their mini skirts and not wearing bras, and he'd be chasing them with the camera. While I was working as a photographer in advertising, I was working to someone else's layout. It wasn't my idea, it wasn't my creation. I would have an image that I would have to copy, and that was someone else's idea. And after a while, I got a little bit frustrated that I was very restricted with the kind of photography that I was shooting. So I started shooting my own projects, and my earlier work very much related back to my own teenage years. My first project was Teenage Stories. So I'm just showing a little bit of my project, Mothers and Daughters. It's a project that relates to the relationship that I had or have with my mother, but also the relationship that my mother had with her mother, and also my sister's, the relationship with our mother. So this is a recreation of, that's meant to be my mother with me. When my parents got divorced and my father got custody over us children, he took us from Germany to England, and that's my mother saying to me, everything will be okay. I photographed real mother and daughter's relationships in their real homes, but staged the setting according to my life. So they were acting out my life. I was doing therapy at the time because like 10, 15 years later, I was struggling with what happened in the past, that I wasn't with my mother anymore. I was, in a way, the mother looking after my younger siblings. And this was like a way of releasing, of me expressing myself through photography. The first 5 years, I told stories about my past and my childhood and teenage years. And then I felt I had enough and started a totally new approach to photography for me. My project, Feral Children, is a project on children who became feral through either neglect from their parents or finding themselves abandoned, finding comfort with animals rather than having any human or very little human contact. This boy, Prava, they call him the bird boy, was discovered in Russia in 2008, and he was in his home with a very young mother, but no contact with her. She didn't speak to him, and he started copying the behavior of birds and would make sounds like birds, like chirping sounds, and they had many, many birds at home. Many people ask me what inspires me to take pictures. It's many different things. One of them was a book I read by a woman called Marina Chapman. She was discovered in Colombia. She was 5 years old, and she was drugged and kidnapped and thrown into a jungle and survived, copying the behavior of capuchin monkeys for about 4 years, living by herself in the jungle. She was discovered by hunters and thrown into a brothel, which she then ran away, and then she lived on the streets for many years. Her life somehow ended up her moving to England, a town called Bradford, getting married and having 2 daughters. I thought her story was so incredible and impossible that I started researching other cases of children that became feral for many different reasons. So I recreate stories that I discover with children actors. I hire locations. I work very closely with a stylist and props and set designers. Vice Media contacted me and I was interviewed a lot. They asked if I could meet Marina Chapman. Her daughter was living in Brighton, and they came to my house in London and followed me on the train, and I went to meet Marina Chapman. When I met her, I burst into tears because I had done a whole project because of her, and she was someone who inspired me to shoot the project, which took a whole year. And when she saw me, I was just nobody to her. I live in London near the River Thames, and one day I was mudlarking. This is something that the river is very tidal, which means at low tide you can actually put on your Wellington boots and walk in the mud. And when you walk in the mud along the river, you can discover many things, like old historic coins that can be like nearly 100 years old. Mudlarking is now very popular amongst people who live in London or out of London, and it's become a real hobby for people to go and collect all sorts of things. Sometimes you might find the odd skull or jewelry or whatever. And I have a friend who goes 3 times a week for about 1 or 2 hours and digs deep into the mud. And I followed him and went with him. It occurred to me that the River Thames has so many different stories and there's so much history. There were many things I didn't know. For example, between 1934 and 71, people used to, at low tide, go down to the foreshore and actually sunbathe and swim in the River Thames. Apparently the sand was imported so that people can do exactly this. And because the tide changes every 3 or 4 hours, it was only a certain time of day that people were able to go down and have their activities on the foreshore. I love seeing these images that I researched, that I created the scene in front of the Tower Bridge. However, I couldn't get access. This area in London is closed to the public. It only opens up once a year for people who want to go mudlarking. I had to create a huge sand studio or sand pit in a studio and photograph the people in the studio because I only had access to this location for about 15-20 minutes. I try and shoot as much in camera as possible because I believe that there's so much post-production these days that I try and stay as true to photography as I possibly can. Before we had the Thames barrier, which controls the tide of the River Thames, London often flooded on a regular basis that many people would actually lose their homes. This is an area in London, in West London where I live, and this is a real flood that occurs regularly. And I was inspired by this image that I found, and I thought it was very quirky how these very elegant women with their fur coats were trying to escape the flood on a door. To me, the pictures are a little bit funny. I look at them with humor, but actually it was a very, very tragic time for many people. And because of what's happening in the world right now, as we all know, we're having a lot of flooding right now. One major flooding happened in 1928 in Tate, Britain, when, again, the embankment collapsed and the water went into Tate, Britain and destroyed many paintings. Again, I was inspired by historical images that I had seen from the past, and I thought it was a very tragic time and what happened. And apparently all the neighbors were just all called out and had to put on their boots and go and quickly get all the paintings out and save them. When I started the project, I always wanted to recreate one story, and that was the 1814 frost fair. The River Thames used to freeze over so much that people could actually have parties on the ice. They would set up tents, big tents, and have a lot of entertainment and make a lot of money very fast selling alcohol, and they used to print their own certificates that things were bought on the ice. I created this scene in a very, very large studio in London where you can probably park possibly 7 double-decker buses. We created ice effect on the ground, and I had big tents put up. And we had a lot of smoke and mist machine in the studio. And as I do my own production, I don't have a producer, it took me 3 months to create.
À ce moment-là, du coup, évidemment, la photographie n'existait pas, donc toutes les représentations qu'on puisse avoir, c'était des illustrations ou des peintures.
I counted we had 95 people on set and decided to make a little short film because I thought, gosh, we're so many people and such a big crew, it would be crazy not to also shoot a film. It was the first time I ever directed my own short film. When COVID hit the world and lockdown happened everywhere, and well, first I was following the news in China. It was a very, very scary time for everybody. I felt I had to do something as an art photographer. We were only allowed to go out 1 hour during the day, a very restricted walks or when you can leave your home. And I noticed people looking forlornly out of their windows as if they were caged in a zoo, and that's kind of how I felt at the time. Very, very restricted where we could go and what we could do. So I reached out to my local neighborhood through social media, Instagram, and everybody was at home. People were either furloughed or homeschooling, and everybody was experiencing COVID in completely different ways. I suddenly also lost my big team of assistants and thought, how can I create something on my own, stay true to my style of photography? So I decided to shoot at twilight in the evening when the sun had just gone down and when the inside light would spill out onto the pavement. I also persuaded my 13-year-old son to help me with the lighting, to help me carry the lighting, and also asked my husband to help as well. And as lockdown eased, I was able to now bring in my extra assistants and more lighting, and also leave my little neighborhood and go more out into London. It was important for me to record this time that we were all going through, and in a way we've all having had to adapt. But for me, it's a reflection of not sadness, it's showing respect to those who have passed away, but also how communities and families connected together. And to me, that's really, really important. It was nearly like we were going back in the past and everybody suddenly, whole life slowed down. To try and stay to with my style of photography, that kind of cinematic look, there'd be a lot of backwards and forwards with the neighbors, what wardrobe they were going to wear and what was suitable for each window. And I decided in the end to actually buy vintage clothing online and have it sent straight to their homes. Everybody was experiencing different emotions during lockdown and during COVID. This family, for example, when I sent her the clothes, the mother didn't touch. She only handled the clothes with gloves and hung the clothes outside for 5 days until she would try them on her daughter. It was and still is a very, very strange time that we're going through. But I decided to enter the images into photographic competitions. this project won many awards that I decided to self-publish it into a book. Edward Hopper was one of my big inspirations. The paintings that he does of people looking very lost and lonely, and also their paintings of people that are inside looking out. And I was very drawn to his paintings for inspiration. And these are my boys. And for the book, I reached out to many publishers, and it's hard to get a book published because they need funding, and most of them want the artists to create a Kickstarter campaign. So I decided to do it by myself, find my own designer and produce the book the size that I wanted and the design how I wanted to create it. Like with all the approach with my photography, everything is very meticulously staged. I would go to the location or to the house maybe 2 or 3 times before the shoot, look at the window, decide the time of day, discuss the wardrobe beforehand, and every single prop, every single detail. For example, I brought in these fake flowers to just add more color. It was amazing the response that I had and where the work has been seen. For example, it was exhibited in 5 different cities in America, and it was part of Italian Vogue and showing in Milan. I think it was maybe 2 years ago, Luke contacted me and asked if I would like to do an artist residency. At first I was like, tell me more. And when Luke and Sandrine showed me the incredible, interesting locations that I could photograph in Metz, I said, I'm coming, that's it, I'm coming. Because I was offered to shoot in the Metz Opera House, and I completely fell in love with the location.
Au fur et à mesure des recherches, on a découvert des choses de plus en plus intéressantes à propos de l'architecture ici, comme par exemple le fait que l'Opéra-Théâtre de Metz est le plus vieil opéra-théâtre d'Europe, qui n'a pas ni brûlé ni été bombardé durant des siècles. On s'est organisé pendant très longtemps pour aller essayer de shooter là-bas, pour trouver les accords. On a voulu photographier la scène, mais bon, c'est un endroit où il se passe vraiment toujours plein de trucs et c'était difficile de bloquer un jour complet avec la scène vide pour photographier.
So I asked Luke, and possibly Bonnie at the time, I can't remember, what are the other rooms in this amazing old opera house? And they found this one amazing room which has got these big, high ceilings with wooden beams. And I just completely fell in love with the space and created my own opera house scene.
On a visité et on a trouvé du coup cet espace qui est le grenier / stock qu'il y a derrière la scène à l'Opéra, qui du coup est un endroit pareil qui a très très bien vieilli, qui a encore toutes les poutres apparentes comme à l'époque et dans laquelle il y avait moyen de recréer une scène très, très importante et très poétique en même temps. Donc on est parti là-dessus.
And what was also amazing is we had access to a lot of the costumes from the opera house. And you walk up these wooden stairs and there's hangers and rows of all this amazing costume, a lot of it covered in dust because it hasn't been touched for a long time.
Les gens de l'opéra étant occupés, mais ceci dit très coopérants, ils ont complètement donné l'accès au grenier qu'ils ont avec tous les habits, tous les costumes qu'ils ont utilisés pour des pièces antérieurement, qu'ils ont récupérés de la part d'autres opéra-théâtres. En tous, 3 greniers gigantesques avec des rangées d'habits dans lesquels on avait à peu près libre choix pour habiller tout le monde. Et c'est ce qui donne dans cette photo des costumes vraiment à la fois de qualité et qui restitue bien du coup ce que peut être un opéra, un théâtre.
This particular room was full of stuff. It was just loads and loads of set design from previous performances that we went in the day before, a whole group of us, and spent 2-3 hours just clearing it all out and starting with the fresh look that I was after. One other location was Gare de Metz. I completely and utterly fell in love with this beautiful, beautiful room. I felt very privileged that I was able to spend a whole day in this amazing historic location.
Parmi les autres trésors qu'il y a dans la ville de Metz, il y a évidemment les salons cachés de la gare, qui sont ouverts qu'un jour par an pour les journées du patrimoine en septembre. et elle a été assez impressionnée que nous, pour une photo, pour une résidence artistique associative, on puisse avoir full accès et les clés en main à cet espace qui n'est jamais ouvert à personne, et de pouvoir rendre hommage un petit peu à toutes les choses qui se sont passées dans cette gare et prendre cette fantastique photo.
It's a recreation of World War I when the station was specially built for getting the soldiers around, and of course I had to include German soldier uniforms for the men. I think many of you may have been to the exhibition in Basilique Saint-Vincent, maybe yesterday. I read somewhere, I don't know if it is true, but I've read it a few times, that apparently the basilique was once used as a veterinary place for horses. And I thought this was such a fantastic idea because it's such a striking, beautiful church. To then bring in this majestic horse into the location, to me, felt visually very, very striking.
Donc à l'endroit, à la Basilique Saint-Vincent, où il y a actuellement l'exposition, à laquelle on vous convie si vous n'êtes pas encore venu. Donc cette basilique désacralisée a été un petit peu avant la Révolution française, un endroit qui a été pris par l'armée comme hôpital de guerre, et notamment pour les chevaux. Pour cette photo qu'il y a derrière moi, on a décidé de reconstituer ça, donc une nurse qui s'occupe des chevaux abîmés par la guerre.
During some research on the internet, I discovered Arsenal de Metz, and I was very curious about the space because it's a very, very striking place for a music hall. And what I thought was so interesting about this place was that it was all created out of wood.
À partir du moment où elle a vu les photos qu'on lui a envoyées, elle a commencé à s'intéresser très fortement à la ville de Metz, à son passé, à son patrimoine et aux bâtiments qu'il y avait là. Et c'est à ce moment qu'on est tombé aussi sur l'Arsenal, qui donc à l'époque a été construit par les Allemands, était un bâtiment militaire, qui a été rénové complètement en bois et qui, pareil, donne une texture assez extraordinaire aux photos. Donc c'était assez intéressant de voir que 100 ans auparavant, il y a des munitions de guerre qui étaient stockées à cet endroit et que maintenant on fait de la musique.
And what I loved about the place, it was just all very monochromatic tonally, and it reminded me a little bit nearly like a doll's house. I also got a haute couture designer involved, and the dress came from Paris, and to me it was important to show something very striking against this very graphic backdrop. I completely fell in love with Église des Trinitaires. To me, it's a very, very beautiful old church, and to me, it just made sense to have the purity of these very innocent-looking nuns helping a man who's helpless and a starving man. Obviously, he isn't, he's a model, but I wanted to tell that story.
Donc en allant à l'église des Trinitaires, qui du coup était tenue à l'époque par l'ordre des Trinitaires à partir de 1100 quelque chose, ça lui a semblé évident et super fort de recréer du coup cette scène avec les nonnes qui s'occupent donc d'un mendiant, puisque l'ordre du Trinitaire était à l'époque rachetait les esclaves qui étaient envoyés aux galères pour leur rendre leur liberté. Aussi on fait pas mal d'actions pour les gens qui n'avaient pas de toit ou qui n'avaient pas à manger. Pour cette photo qui retranscrit un ordre assez pauvre, du coup à ce moment-là, il a été question de comment refaire les vêtements sans devoir les acheter neufs, avec peut-être des techniques d'antan et tout. Donc les robes, les toges qu'elles ont été empruntées à l'Opéra, qui ont été des pièces uniques faites pour des gens en particulier. On a, avec notre couturière, recréé toutes les coiffes et toutes les différentes couches qu'elles avaient sur elles pour reprendre l'esprit de l'ordre des Trinitaires de l'époque.
And this painting by Rembrandt was my inspiration for the creation. I think what's really important to know is that I couldn't have done this without the help of so many people from Metz. There were so many interns and helpers and prop stylists, set design, hair and makeup team. I think there were about maybe at one point 10 of them. Without the energy and the help from everybody, this shooting would not have been possible. Due to COVID, we weren't able to do the shoot until really a few months ago, and luckily we were able to exhibit the work now. For me to be here again is very, very special. I really had the most amazing week with the most wonderful people. I'll be very sad to be leaving again tomorrow.
puisque en plus du Covid, il y avait le Brexit durant la préparation. Ça a été très compliqué pour nous de communiquer, de se mettre d'accord et de faire en sorte de préparer tout ça. Ce qui a fait qu'une fois que tout finalement était prêt, quand elle est arrivée un week-end avant cette semaine de résidence, de voir que tout était déjà là, que tout le monde était prêt, que l'équipe était au taquet et qu'on a pu avancer très rapidement et sans avoir aucun problème, fait que la semaine à Metz a été incroyable pour elle. Et elle est très très heureuse de revenir ici pour inaugurer cette exposition et vous avoir ici.
If you were here last night, I did a big thank you, but I have to just stress again that Luke and Sandrine, thank you so much, really. It's amazing to have been doing the work here. And also to Bonnie, who was my left and right hand and my translator and finding props and just there for me the whole time. It's been amazing. I'm finished if anybody has questions.
Avant que je vous propose de poser éventuellement des questions à Julia, concernant le travail à Metz, il y a d'autres endroits qui avaient été fléchés. Comment vous avez fait pour les circonscrire à 5 lieux? Quels étaient les critères principaux? Est-ce que c'était l'histoire qui avait eu lieu dans ce lieu-là, la qualité architecturale ou historique du lieu? Comment s'est opéré vraiment ce choix pour limiter à 5 lieux?
It really was just my gut instinct. I just felt that these 5 particular locations were incredibly interesting for different reasons and also for the history of the places. It's very hard these days to find locations that you can go into and get access to for all day, so I felt I would take advantage of them, to me, the most interesting locations. It's how I really approach all my ideas. I start with possibly a location or with an idea, and then I build it up and start working on what story do I want to tell in that frame in front of me. It's nearly like a empty canvas and starting a painting and then working on it, and that's the whole build-up process in the production stage.
En vue de sa manière de réfléchir les images, du coup elle aime bien beaucoup partir d'une histoire, d'une impression et après construire l'image au fur et à mesure. Du coup partir d'endroits qui étaient très chargés historiquement font que les histoires se racontent toutes seules et au final les lieux ici ont donné les images d'une manière assez évidente.
It was unfortunate that I couldn't come and look at the locations because France was in lockdown and I couldn't travel to France. So Luke and Bonnie went and photographed everything in each location. So I had a lot of help and a lot of information given to me, and then a day before the shoot we zapped around all 5 locations with my professional camera and chose my angle. Luke said that he received 1,000 emails from me, apparently, because every time I sent an email, he had to then translate it, and then he sent me an email that he had translated for me to make it easier for me. And so I received it back in English, but there was so much backwards and forwards, you will not believe it.
Justement, au-delà du travail en amont qui a dû se faire à distance, que ce soit les repérages, le casting, etc., on vient d'en parler, quelles ont été les principales difficultés que vous avez rencontrées pendant la semaine passée à Metz?
I think I don't speak French. Luckily, Bonnie stood by me and translated everything. I think sometimes working as a fine art photographer by yourself, and you're not working with an art director, which I do in advertising, you're kind of working out struggles yourself. And sometimes on one location, I wasn't finding the shot, but then it all came together in the last half an hour. The 2 churches were very, very cold, so having our nearly naked man in, I don't know what the temperature was, maybe 5 degrees, lying there, his whole body started really shaking, and we had to stop the shoot and stop and start a lot. And access into the Metz Opera House was very complicated because all the equipment had to be brought in and then brought up into a huge, enormous lift and then down corridors, and that took a long time. And then after the shoot, when everybody's tired, all the equipment has to be brought back down again, dismantled and back down. And then on top of that, all the sets that we cleared out the day before had to all be put back. So it was a lot of work for many people.
Donc ça, c'était un travail qui est, mine de rien, super long, de rien que monter tout le matériel à l'endroit, après le soir de le redémonter, et puisqu'on ne pouvait pas laisser tout dans le camion parqué dans la rue, on était obligé de rentrer encore à bout d'essai le soir, de décharger tous les trucs chers du camion à l'intérieur du studio, pour les reprendre le lendemain matin dans le van et aller à l'endroit suivant. Donc beaucoup de temps, beaucoup de travail pour beaucoup de monde et beaucoup de fatigue.
De quelle manière votre intuition, votre créativité interagit ou trouve le bon dosage entre le réel que porte un lieu, l'histoire que ce lieu peut porter et la dimension de fiction que vous apportez, de façon à ce que la photo au final puisse interroger le temps qui passe?
It's very important when creating any historical images to do a lot of research beforehand, and that can be research as in a lot of reading up about what happened certain times, and also research on historical pictures that might be photographs or paintings from the past. I mean, none of my images are complete historical references, but trying to then work with costumes that might be close to that era, because not everything is possible.
Après, du coup, il y a toute une part où là, on stoppe ce process et ça devient vachement plus technique, où du coup, on va chercher tous les éléments dont on a besoin pour les ramener dans l'idée qu'on a eue précédemment. Donc, c'est-à-dire qu'il y a un moment où l'idée et la réflexion s'arrêtent et on passe à la partie technique et organisationnelle du projet.
It's little things like, you know, bringing in wood and taking out anything that is plastic. You know, that's like the obvious. But also hair and makeup, costume, and finding references for this as well. The color palette is really important. For example, the Gare de Metz, the train station, it's the brown muted colors and the wood, and then also very carefully with the lighting so that everything kind of blends together and gives it that painterly feeling that I'm after.
La deuxième partie de la question, du coup, l'interrogation du temps qui passe et comment, si elle perçoit justement cette tension temporelle qu'il y a dans ce qu'elle crée.
Oh my God, how to answer that one? Yeah, it's constant. It's constant.
C'est conscient. C'est conscient.
Est-ce qu'il y a des questions dans la salle?
C'était sur votre série Testament of Love. Qu'est-ce qui vous a inspiré en fait pour créer cette série?
A Testament to Love is a reflection of single women where love doesn't quite go the way you want it to, and it's also an inspiration of a split second of a film. It's the before or after something has just happened. So I was very inspired to dress the women in colored wigs and using a lot of very colorful, nearly pop art kind of images, but at the same time there's a tragedy that's happening inside, like a turmoil.
Ah, une autre question?
Il y a tout un univers cinématographique qu'on identifie un peu dans le processus. On a l'impression d'une grande scène de prise de vue dans un grand film un petit peu de grosse production. Je voulais savoir si c'est un peu cet esprit-là et si effectivement dans le processus de création, il y a beaucoup de prises qui sont faites comme au cinéma, ou est-ce que vous mettez en place les éléments et puis le moment venu, quand tout est en place, vous prenez la photo? Comment ça se passe? Est-ce qu'il y a beaucoup de répétitions avec les acteurs, beaucoup de mise en place? Voilà, un peu comme au cinéma. Ça, c'est la première question. Et la deuxième question, c'est la part de post-production dans vos photos. Donc, il y a beaucoup de lumière, beaucoup de production sur le moment, mais quelle est la part de post-production? Je serais curieux de savoir un peu.
On the shoot itself, I have a big team of photographic assistants and we bring in a lot of lighting. We don't just have one light that we just throw on the set. We create lights 360 degrees around the scene and top light. And that gives it that very kind of cinematic and also often quite a painterly feeling.
Effectivement, comme au cinéma, dans les photos qu'elle prend, il y a énormément de techniques. Là, en l'occurrence, on avait 6 personnes dans l'équipe lumière. Et du coup, le but, c'est une fois qu'on a pris les photos de tous les personnages ensemble, séparément, après, on va vraiment prendre soin de tous les endroits de l'image pour les éclairer séparément. Le plafond, le mur, les ombres derrière ce pylône, etc. Et après, du coup, ce sera un patchwork qui va être assemblé avec les endroits réussis de chaque photo.
I always try and shoot as much in camera as possible, but there's always post-production. For example, if I'm photographing a big scene of people, I might swap out a person or shoot them separately and put them in because they suit the picture better. But the general color palette and the general look and feel is a lot in camera. When I first started photography, I would shoot with a 5:4 plate camera, one sheet at a time with a cloth over the head. And the camera is still now always on a tripod. So I set the camera up on a tripod and then I create the scene in front. And I don't shoot to a small card, even though I shoot digitally now. The camera is tethered to a laptop, and then the laptop is then attached to a very big screen. So every time an image comes through, I'm looking at it on a big monitor. And sometimes to tell a particular story, I have to use CGI, which is computer-generated imagery. Like the flooding in the Tate, Britain, the water, that's done by professionals in post-production.
C'est une équipe de professionnels de la 3D qui viennent donc prendre des images spécialement pour pouvoir recréer ça en 3D par après. Donc à savoir prendre des photos 360 depuis plusieurs endroits dans la pièce pour pouvoir après reconstituer tous les reflets qu'il pourrait y avoir en fonction de l'endroit de la flotte dont il s'agit.
The whole thing is a very slow process from the idea to the production, and the shoot always takes a long day.
D'autres questions?
Est-ce que c'est une habitude pour vous d'être en résidence dans une ville, ou est-ce que c'est la première fois à Metz? Et si ce n'est pas la première fois, où est-ce que vous êtes allé, dans quels autres endroits, et est-ce que vous avez d'autres projets de ce type?
This is the first time I've done artist residency, and when Lou contacted me and asked if I would come to Metz for 2 months, I said, I can't come for 2 months. I have children at home. I would love to live in Metz for 2 months. Le Turc, who was here, I believe 3 years ago, was here for a long time. And he was really able to create something over a period. And I wish I had that too. I'm jealous. At the same time, because of COVID, I don't think it would have been possible as well. Yes, this is the first time I've done an artist residency, and I loved it.
Voilà, je vous remercie. Et on remercie Julia Fullerton-Betten.
Merci.